Wow, that is so tight. Yeah, what a difference.
Welcome back, everybody. This is the second part of our suspension installation on the Camaro. It's a 99 Camaro, so that is the 4th generation Fbody. And we're going to talk about all the components that we're installing into it. I'm really excited for this video because we've got a couple of really exciting announcements, and I'm really stoked for the parts that are going to be going into it because I think it's going to make a world of difference with this car. So let's get straight into the exciting news. What I went with was Viking coilovers. I did this for a couple of reasons. The biggest thing being that these guys are fantastic when it comes to building whatever you can think of custom to your vehicle. So Viking Performance, they're actually here in Minnesota. I'm up in Duluth. They're down in the Twin Cities, so sort of central Minnesota area. So it's always awesome to be able to work with a local brand. I'm really excited to be involved with them. So let's talk about the pieces that I opted for. This is a two-way adjustable coilover setup. This particular set that's in my hand right now is meant for the front because it has a T-bar connection on the bottom and it has the bearing mount on the top of it. What's awesome about this setup is that you sort of limit the amount of bushings that are in here by having like the bearing mount at the top of it. I eliminated that whole upper bracket as well as the big rubber mount with the factory struts, factory shocks. But what is great about Viking is they also have a kit that will work with all of those factory components if you simply want to bolt in a nice coilover setup on the factory pieces and not do like a double shear style upper bracket. So there's a lot of different ways you can skin the cat, we'll say. Now, the specific one that I went with is the Berserker series, which this is their newest iteration of their coilover setup. This one is a two-way adjustable. There's 20 settings, sort of 19 past the very stop far to the left. And I'm using 550-pound springs on the front and 250-pound springs on the back of it. This has been strictly disassembled so that you guys can kind of see what all of it looks like. There's a few other very important pieces to make sure that you don't void your warranty that I'm going to be doing here in a minute. And that is applying anti-seize to the thrust bearing as well as to the threads itself. These are very, very important steps that you don't want to miss. They're as important as putting your, assembling it appropriately. So, what we're going to do next then, now that we've kind of covered the components and what's going to be going into the vehicle, the next step is for us to actually start installing it and showing you each of the steps and some pointers for putting it all together. And let's get this thing on the ground and start testing it out. guys, so now that we've got the rear end ready, we've got the old components pulled out, now it's time to install the brackets. So let's go over how these brackets work from UMI. What we have here is, this is the lower bracket, and you're going to remove this piece, which is your shock mount. Basically, it's just like a gnarly looking shoulder bolt, and this flat portion is what goes into the bushing on the lower part of the shock. So you get that thing out of there, and then this bracket replaces it. What's cool about this bracket is that you're going to use a 1/2 inch bolt that's going to tighten down in the hole that this whole thing went through, this crazy piece. And that hole's going to go through, but then you've got this top bolt as a reinforcement, and it sort of ensures it from like rotating at all. So this hole doesn't exist on that lower bracket on your axle tube. So get this guy bolted in, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a 3/8 drill bit, wherever that is. I think it's actually on the drill. 3/8 drill bit, and I'm going to use this upper hole as a guide. But all I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and get that drill bit started for a split second, basically to give myself sort of a guide for the smaller drill bits that I'm going to use. So you can use a bigger drill bit, get yourself a little point on there. That's going to help keep your smaller drill bits in place and ensure that you've got yourself a centered location or a centered hole in this bracket, so you can drill through that thing, get this thing bolted down. So let's do that right now. Got her in there. All right, and I want to show you guys something so you're not confused, because the instructions are a little bit confusing. So it comes with these spacers, this kit does, and it says that you use them if you use a relocation bracket. And why that's confusing is, well, that's a relocation bracket, but it isn't. What that is that is a coilover lower control arm bracket, or lower bracket. And these are meant for a control arm relocation bracket. So in this case, if you've got a setup like mine, where your lower arms just simply attach to the axle like normal, then you don't got to worry about it. You're going to end up with those spacers left over. So, all right, I'm going to snug these guys down, and then we're going to install the coilovers. Okay, so now that we've got that lower bracket installed on the lower part of the axle, now let's talk about the upper. So this is really important, and this piece, well, it does a couple of things. So basically, it's going to give you a bearing mount on the top side of it, so clevis style. It's a double shear, so you've got supports on both sides. But this whole rounded portion of this thing is super important, because what happens is that this piece of, I think it's like a 3/16 steel or 10 gauge, this is going to help kind of share the load around a little bit more of the floor of the Fbody. So if you've got all of the weight of the whole rear suspension split between these two small mounting locations, say you had a clevis there and that was it, just this bolt through clevis here, that is a lot of force that's going to be on a very small spot. So what this does is it spreads the weight out a little bit better, and it ensures that you're not going to have any damage or any flexing or any significant failures that are going to happen in the back of that. So it's really slick. But what's really important is don't get ahead of yourself. You need to make sure that you wait to install this bracket onto the coilover and then put it into the car. You don't want to get ahead of yourself and try and slap this guy in first, because you'll actually find that your bolts, you cannot get these bolts to slide in because of the small space around this bracket. So what we're going to do now is we're going to bolt this down onto the coilover assembly, and then we're going to figure out how to get this in there, because I'm actually solo right now in the garage. So hopefully with that lower bracket, maybe I can kind of keep it in place with that. But anyway, let's go ahead and get this bolted onto the coilover so that we can get this installed into the passenger rear. Now we're getting to the exciting part. We're sort of on the home stretch of installing these coilovers. So I went ahead and I splashed a little bit of paint on a few of the last suspension pieces that I haven't yet gotten a chance to do that. So I took care of that, and now we're gonna finish this thing up by putting in these front coilovers. The beauty of these front coilovers is the install is incredibly simple. If you're not rebuilding your control arms, it's as simple as detaching the upper ball joint, splitting that open, and then you can just slide this thing right in there. So depending on which which version of the coilover you are going with determines which components you're going to be using. In my case, I've got that nice UMI upper control arm bracket, and that gives me a bearing mount on the top of it, which is what my coilovers come with. Oh, rolling away on me. So it's incredibly simple to throw this thing together. And because Viking uses a bearing that is 1 1/4 inch wide, the upper control arm bracket has spacers that work for that. So basically, that bracket comes with a couple of different spacers depending on which components you decide to use. Viking is very much compatible with the bracket that they have. So between having that simplicity on the upper side of it, and then also having the T-bar on the lower side of it, it's incredibly simple to install this. So what we got to do here, and we've alluded to this earlier, is that we've got to make sure that we do a last little bit of servicing on these things to make sure that they're ready. And that comes down to putting anti-seize on them. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pop this apart, and I'm going to thread back some of the lower spring mounts, and I'm going to do just a little touch of anti-seize on it. I'm going to do some anti-seize on the thrust bearing, and then I'm going to slap it back together, and we're going to go and get started with the passenger front end. And I'll show you how simple it really is to put this in. Could definitely use some take-up springs. I think that might be something that we revisit in another video. We'll make a few changes with the coilovers themselves, and I think we'll probably add take-up springs. And what those do is they provide kind of constant tension, so that if you have a suspension that's lowered enough that you've got a droop, and it's like leaving everything loose, like especially that kind of top cap, it's a good idea to have something to kind of keep pressure on it and keep there from being slack inside of the entire coilover assembly. So I think we're going to revisit that. But yeah, let's get it on the ground and let's kind of start setting a ride height. All right, moment of truth. Ooh, that's way too low in the front. Yeah, so we'll have to go up about an inch. As much as I'd love to leave it right there. Yeah. Okay, so she'll go back up. The rear's got to go down 2 inches. Front has got to go up 1 inch. Roughly, I should measure the fenders. They look like they're equal though, which is cool. That's kind of crazy. I didn't expect that. Looks good. Okay. All right, let's grab some spanner wrenches and get everything adjusted. Okay, so to measure this, I'm going to bring the lower right up to it and then hold it in place. And because it's not loaded, I can adjust it like this with my hand. We're going to go up about 1 inch, and I think I'm going to do about 1.25 inches. The good news is this is actually helping to kind of take up the space up top. Maybe I won't need take-up springs. Pretty quick here, we might actually need the spanners, because it's starting to compress the spring a little bit. That's 7/8. You could try 7/8, see what that does. Let's try 7/8. What's great is that it definitely took up the space now. All right, so we'll do 7/8 on the other side now. 7/8. I'll do it. Okay, so now with the back, we're going to come down about 2 inches. Or almost 2 inches. Boy, that's also going to put the axle real close to the bump stop. So what we'll do is we'll measure from the seat to the bottom of the threads. Well, actually, we'll go to the adjuster. So we've got 7/8 of an inch from the adjuster. So let's try this out and see what this does. All right, let's get the other side adjusted. All right. 7/8 of an inch off of the damping adjusters. Almost. There we go. Okay, so now let's try it again.
right, guys, so it's time to test this thing out properly. I got a nice little ride out here, and what I'm doing is I'm driving on a road called Jay Cooke State Park. It's effectively northern Minnesota's tail of the dragon. It's a beautiful road that snakes through the kind of like through the forest up by Jay Cooke River, and this is kind of up in the Duluth area. It's a beautiful road, and it's proving to test this pretty good. So what we're doing is we're just checking to see like kind of how the suspension feels, what the body roll is like, kind of all of that stuff, just getting a sense of the new suspension in here. And it's, I mean, so far these corners that I've taken, to say that there's an increase in confidence would be an understatement. This is pretty amazing, because how it was before was just utter shit. I mean, it was so bad. Does feel like I might want to replace some wheel bearings, maybe. Gosh, it's so much better. So what I've got on here is the Viking Performance two-way adjustable coilovers. Just to kind of, I mean, you guys probably know that already, but just to recap it, we've got them set at 4 and 6 on the compression and rebound, and I think I've got those two reversed. I want to say it's 6 on the compression, 4 on the rebound. So it's the high end of the cruising settings, sort of their recommendation, but obviously that's just a baseline to go off of. You're going to want to set it to what your preferences are. I got to say, this feels amazing for being at a cruising setting. So, but really anything's going to feel amazing over what it was, which is the blown suspension that was in here. This is pretty amazing. So much so that I think it might be time to upgrade other components to accommodate the new suspension. Wow, that is so tight. Yeah, what a difference. This car went from being like so sloppy, so shitty, to just being just tight. Wow, that feels amazing. So we rebuilt the control arms. We got new ball joints in here. And then obviously these coilovers, and the difference is incredible. I mean, the steering feel is so sharp. There's still a tiny bit of slop in the center position, like the sort of zero position of the steering wheel. I'm not really sure what that's about. I'm gonna have to figure that out and kind of dive into it a little bit, but everything else feels so good. The only thing I noticed is like it sounds like maybe a wheel bearing is getting a little bit kind of up there in age. So I might need to swap out some wheel bearings. Not a big deal considering they've got 130,000 miles. So good, it's so sharp. Man, this is why you build these cars. Oh man, a sports car that you can't drive like a sports car is such a shame. And you know, these Fbodies, they're really just built to be like the working man's, I mean, it's just like the working man's sports car. It's just novelty, it's fun, it makes good noises, they just make awesome power. It's got a 6-speed in it. Just everything's good about these, and at the same time everything's shitty, and I think that's what makes them so lovable. And you throw an awesome suspension in this thing and it is just game on. So thanks guys for tuning in. We'll see you on the next video.